All right, yes, we are live. America's Artistic Legacy. I'm Paul Bass, and we have with us Professor Carol. And this is the class on the America's Artistic Legacy. The session is New Technologies and the Gilded Age. Going from the Pony Express, the telegraph, changing communications in the mid-19th century. So let's get to it, Professor Carol. Hello, and thanks for
Hi,
doing this today.
always my pleasure.
Oh
Thank you for
man,
being there.
I feel like there's a lot of ground to cover because this stuff is of interest to me, you know. So, if I'm asking questions that seem like a fourth-year-old a fourth grade boy asking you questions about the Pony Express, I'm sorry, but in a sense it is that guy.
Well, aren't we all really, if we're honest with ourselves?
Oh man, I'm telling you. But yeah, you made the point that it lasted only 18 months, and we don't even really think of that as
No,
how much of an icon it was. Yet it was a fairly short period of time.
it's one of the greatest ideas. I always think if they could have just started it a few, 25, 30 years earlier, think of the money they might have made. But it's so ingrained in our popular Americana, the Pony Express. We know what that, we know the icon, the design, the term. Um, but it's a great example of something that is completely taken away by technology, a different new technology. And that story is going to be our story up to today from this point on. I mean, technologies have changed things all along, but it took longer, I'm sure the wheel changed a lot of things. We weren't there. But and the fact that you're surprised that it was 18 months, that is so common. In our assignment for that unit, I asked the kids or the grown-up students to go to like some friends at a party or in your class or some relatives, and I always loved doing this. I used to do this with my students at the university, and so ask them about the Pony Express and see what they know about it. People always know a little bit about it, and then ask them when it was, and ask how long did it last. And you would not believe, most of us will come up with very different answers than what the facts are. Most people will say, they'll think it lasted 100 years or something, or 80 years, or because they can't imagine something that clear in our popular culture even today was such a tiny little short thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you also talk about Mark Twain and American humor. What is American humor?
Ha! I think it's American humor must be when you invest all that money to put together, 400 ponies or horses, they weren't ponies, and build all those way stations and take all your investors or whatever and set up this incredible route that will get a letter there in 10 short days, right, from the Midwest to San Francisco, and then along comes something called the telegraph, and it does it instantly. That's probably
Uh,
American humor, isn't it?
uh,
And now what are you going to do, except close shop? No, that's kind of the downside of American humor, isn't it?
well, we
Um,
don't. Yeah, we don't see what kind of technology really was a lifesaver in those days.
well, it was a lifesaver, but it also changed how, the entire structure. And I think what makes Mark Twain so interesting is he was, as we all know, I mean, he's a majorly popular world author, almost to the point where you think, wait a minute, you guys like Mark Twain more than we do. Maybe you read him more than we do. I was so struck by that in Russia, how many people knew Mark Twain far better than I did. It's almost embarrassing, if you think about it. You think, oh, wait a minute, um, I don't want to, I want to act like an ignorant person, but no, I haven't read that particular short story by Mark Twain. You apparently have. But he was writing at a time, if you think about it, where he was really seeing these changes, and he starts in Hannibal, Missouri, and I don't know if you all have been there, but it is just like you'd imagine it, right? This, a Mississippi river town, not the southern side of the Mississippi, which is what I always thought about, but where you get snow. And you see how he grew up. The house is still there. The houses where the adventures happen. You can just see all of these things happening in his childhood, and to think that he's going to become a world traveler, world renowned in his lifetime, an icon, talking about cultural icons, a superhero. Today there would be, and there probably are awards named after him. I don't even know it, but in his own lifetime there would have been, literary awards. Probably if it would have been today, he'd probably had his own museum, and I can't even think what he would have had. He'd have his own, his own cable channel. That's what he would have had. But just this magnificent force of humor, and yet he started as a little boy running around barefoot right there in Hannibal. I think that's sort of extraordinary American kind of story.
Right. The ground that he covered too was pretty amazing. I've watched a pretty good documentary on his life, and we think of him around the Mississippi there, but he really made some distance there. He traveled out west, and so he
Europe, overseas, yeah.
Well, going to
I think it's close.
I'm sorry.
Pardon?
You guys filmed.
Oh no, I was just gonna.
Didn't you?
We did. We went to Hannibal. We were close by, and we said, "Oh my gosh, how you do?" You say, "We're only okay. Well, we're so crazy." We say, "Oh, we're only a couple hundred miles from Hannibal." And then we think we can't do that, and then we think, "Wait a minute, when are we ever going to be near Hannibal again?" So we had to do it, and we've done that with a lot of things, and I'm just so glad we did. It's always so wonderful when you can be in the exact, if the houses, if you could actually walk the same floors as these people that are authors or statesmen. I just think there's nothing better. And I know a lot of families sacrifice a lot to take their children to historical sites, and maybe it's only something so-called small or close by, but listen, that's what kids remember from their education when they're kids. They're not going to remember the grammatical exercise or their math homework. They're going to remember that trip. It's a very fine thing to do. I know you all do it in your family when you can. I know that.
Well, we try. Yeah, that's my fault, I guess. But yes, I've been known to here, let's go off on this exit, because of this marking. I love the fact that they put it on the highways, the big brown sign that says, Mark Twain's home, and things like that, because otherwise they wouldn't hit me like that. I wouldn't be thinking, oh, I'm passing by, where Mark Twain grew up. But that's a good idea for another class or another documentary. There is Professor Carol's Side Trips. We could just have videos of all your.
Yeah, there are. Well, there have been some interesting ones, and then you start down the road and you go, okay, well, we thought it was only 20 miles. Okay, it's 45 miles. Well, now what do we do? The great American dilemma. But it is kind of an American dilemma, and I think it's that spirit. I mean, Twain really captured it. His little pithy remarks. There's a reason why they've stayed in our humor. But he was a kind of a mean guy too. When he didn't like something, when he was aggressive against it, I don't know how many of the we don't really usually read those essays sometimes, but let's say he spared no words. So you wanted to be on the right side of Mark Twain. That's probably something to think about.
Wow.
So what else can we think about as we hang out here in Google?
Well, I don't have a transition for it. I just kind of have a list of things that you go on in this session, and one of them is, I know from many conversations that you're really fond of the Library of Congress. Okay, first of all, how can somebody be fond of a Library of Congress? And I want you to explain that to me.
Well, how can you not be? Because it's our national library, and we all pay taxes for it. The Library of Congress, especially all those years when I was teaching a grad bibliography class at SMU in the music master's program, and this is the kind of program you have to take in a master's or a doctoral program, where you just work on music bibliography and techniques of manuscript reading and some kind of tough stuff, it's usually shocking to everybody. It was to me when I first took it, but you begin to understand that national libraries have played a big role in European and in non-European parts of the world. The National Library has been this energizing force for collecting and preserving the culture. And we come to it late in America. Think of European countries where they've had libraries that go back centuries and centuries. So our National Library was founded in the late when our country was founded, and it was meant to be a legislator's tool. So the initial collection for the Library of Congress was things like almanacs and nautical books and books on agriculture and books on other countries' constitutions for the lawmakers and law codes from other countries and tools for legislators. And the Library of Congress still has that absolute, they have that massive department for legislative research, and congressional people and other governmental people are constantly calling the Library of Congress or sending their aides, back and forth, find out about this. Well, what was the canned tomato production in such and such place in 1953? Well, somebody's got to know that, and that's the kind of work the Library of Congress is always doing. Or how many, I didn't even, how many roads up this kind of mountain to this kind of, all of this kind of information that's important to lawmakers, right? But there was a big shift in the Library of Congress when we sort of had the whole thing burned down, in that little war between the Brits and, that little 1812 thing that happened, right? And the Library of Congress was burned up, which we don't think about it, and they had to start over again. And that's when Thomas Jefferson sold, not donated, it's very important, he sold at a decent price, not a high price, but not a low price. He sold his collection of books, most of it, a lot of it, to the new Library of Congress. And why this is so important, I'm giving along, I don't want to do the whole course, but Jefferson had all those things that you need as a state manager, legislator's tool. He had all that interest, obviously, but he had books on art, books on music, books on philosophy, literature, French. He was such a cultured man, and it set the Library of Congress going in a very new direction that was like most European countries' national libraries. And from that point on, the Library of Congress became this great vacuum cleaner that sucked up every publication it could get, including things published abroad, but definitely things published in this country. And so back now to the American Memory Project, it was these prescient, visionary saints, if I may, bibliographical saints, if I may, who saw in the early 19th century particularly, early 20th century, the need to start collecting Americana. Not just things that were published here, but to start focusing on collections of what we might call folk materials. And then there's a kind of a break, a focus on, and of course the other great institution is the Smithsonian. There's a group where clearly, yes, we're doing dinosaur bones and we're doing, rocks from things from Egypt or whatever we can get that's world archaeological, or portraits, the National Portrait Gallery, all of it. But we also want to get American folk instruments, and we also want to get things that, that American advertisements and I can't even think of things, soapboxes from, the 19 whatevers, so that we have examples of our popular American culture. So between the way the Smithsonian has collected and the Library of Congress has collected, this Americana is just rich in both institutions. So, almost done, in the as computer technology moved along, the problem with Library of Congress, Paul, and the reason you're not in love with it, is you haven't spent a lot of time hanging out there. You need to do your Google Hangouts, and in the reading room, and it's just so amazing. And there's 5 buildings, just so incredible. Plus lots of storage warehouses. I think how many miles, I should have those quotes in the top of my head, and I don't. How many miles of shelving at the Library of Congress? You could go, you don't want to know how far you can go. Way more than a bunch of tanks of gas would get you. So all this is to say that when they began to realize the prospects for digital technology, they began digitalizing a lot of their Americana, and that's the American Memory Project. And the American Memory Project brought online, certainly not all of it, but some very interesting collections of American, for example, sheet music from the 19th century, Civil War ballads, theater placards or posters, that would have been important around the Vaudeville area, things on Native Americans that were, to see the stuff you would have had to go, and now you can click and read the text and see the pictures, and really it's as if you again had a private collection that you could walk into. It's marvelous for kids' homework. It's marvelous to explore. The Gershwin collection, there's just so many things that are at the Library of Congress, not only worldwide but American, and that's where that American Memory Project is a gateway to a lot of materials. That was one long paragraph, wasn't it? Sorry. But that is your national library, and because of digital technology, we don't have to go there all the time to get it. We can really access an enormous amount of it now from our homes.
Well, I can
Now I'm
probably
quiet.
guarantee you, I'm not going. You won't find me there reading nautical charts, but I will. As per your recommendation, we actually have a comment from one of our viewers, from Jane, who says she went there on your recommendation, and their family enjoyed it and now sees the benefits of it. So, you know,
Yay!
you have a witness there.
Well, it's a I'm a witness. Thank you. Well, it's a beautiful place. I mean, the actual physical building of the one with the dome. It's right behind Congress. The dome. The inside of the reading room, the decor, the marble, the statue, because we finally opened the new Jefferson Building. I think it was 1897, I believe is the date. I have to double check that, but I think that's right. It was a national event that America finally had a regal, palatial national library to which heads of state all over the world sent gifts, mosaics and paintings and vases, and I mean we finally joined the world in terms of having this kind of a palatial structure. It's very important on that level too. And when you go to Washington, you got to go see the space, you got to go to this, and you got to do this, and most people never get to the Library of Congress. So I'm always telling people, go to the Library of Congress. It's a free tour. They do it, I think, 2 or 3 times a day. It won't be crowded. And unless your kids are really toddlers, they're going to be impressed by it, I think. Go, 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 go. Please.
Okay. All right.
Okay, enough of that. I'm sorry, I got a little carried away.
Library bucket list. Library of Congress. I do believe you. Okay.
Okay.
Well, okay. So you mentioned the inventor Emile Berliner. What's the significance?
Oh, yeah, and see, that's another, you can access a lot of Berliner materials with the Library of Congress. Oh, see, that's the thing, and we get into this unit, and I don't want to do too much with this, because if you start looking at this whole issue of who gets credit for inventions, this is hot button stuff. This is stuff that, you probably know. Are you a fan of inventions, Paul? Do you follow any of that?
Well, definitely, but I mean, it's specifically the Tesla and Edison thing is the stuff of legend, and it's big these days. I've just received 2 or 3 weeks ago a press release of a new graphic novel about Tesla, and there's this whole movie behind it, and it is pretty intriguing.
He has, that story is not simple about what really went on in his life, and we'll just say to our viewers, we're not going there in not in a bad sense, but it's very complicated. And what happened, at his death, and he was impoverished. He had created, if you look at it from the Tesla standpoint, practically every direction that's in our modern technology, radar and things that have taken rocket ships to the moon, and certainly we know his inventions in, things like electric inventions and his role in sound reproduction. He was the genius, and yet his life did not work out that way, did it? At least part of it, and then he ends up terribly, and then all this kind of funny stuff happens to his materials when he dies, right? Is that what the novel was dealing with?
Yes. I didn't read it. I just got the press release and looked at a little trailer that they gave me. But there's movies out there. It just seems to be on the. Of course, the electric car is called the Tesla. That they put out.
Mm-hmm.
There's just quite. You go on YouTube and just type in Tesla, you will see all kinds of stuff about him. So it's just, but for me, I don't think I heard of it until I was probably in high school.
Some of it's a little over the edge too, but you can pick through it,
Right. Sure. Well, Berliner was.
Well, and Emile Berliner, who is not nearly. He was not the controversy of Tesla. Tesla is a really cloak and dagger kind of story. Really. I mean, really. If your kids like cloak and dagger and inventions, and this is Tesla. Berliner was just a little bit behind in some respects, depending on how you look at it, chronologically to Edison, but Berliner was right on about the flat disk technology for recording, and his experiments and his inventions and his patents and his recording studio, or not studio, but company, they're doing flat disk, and we all know flat disk won out over cylinders, right? Most of us don't have, any LPs or CDs on a round cylinder, So Berliner was right about that being the optimal way to record sound on a flat disk.
Okay, let me ask you, what in your recollection, do you remember any type of players that your family had? I mean, what did you listen to when you were a kid?
Oh, well, we all had, in my generation, we had this little suitcase that played 78s and 45s, and only
Right.
grown-ups had 33. But see, 33s don't even come out to what, I said 1948? Till you get I think that may, I have to brush up on these dates. Sorry, I haven't thought about them in a long time. I used to teach a unit on all the dates of recording technology, but it does slip some. But
Yeah.
I think it's about then that you get the LP, the long play, the 33 and a third rotation per minute. And so it goes slower so you can get more on it, so it's longer. But did you grow up with a little box?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had the little box with mostly the 45s, but the larger ones would fit on there. But no, I mean, even my uncle, it shows how old I am, but my uncle had a leftover player that used the disc. That used the cylinder.
A cylinder player. Did it work
Yeah.
still and you got to hear it?
Right. No, I didn't get to hear it. Just what is this? Oh, that's what we had stuff on, when I was little, and that type thing. But yeah, I don't even know if it worked. But I just
Now you got to try to
remember looking at
find
the
it.
cylinder and thinking, how does this play?
Yeah, as a kid, you went, what is it?
Right.
Well, we have a 1921 Victor gramophone. We bought it about maybe 15 years ago, and I always love to play it for students because it's I mean it's the horn is internalized, so it looks like a really pretty piece of furniture, like a tall side. Not a side table, a tall, skinny, pretty console. It's console. That's the word I want. It doesn't have the horn coming out because we didn't get one of those. But
Yeah.
so the horn actually is worked into the furniture. So you open these doors and out comes the sound. And it's amazing how loud and what good quality is. And of course you just crank it up, and it plays 15 or so minutes on a good crank, and kids are just fascinated by it. They want to find the plug. There is no plug. So that technology was terrific, except there's all the things it wouldn't record. How do you get a symphony orchestra down a horn? How do you get a chorus to sing into a horn? Even if you put out 20 or 30 horns, balancing the sound, you couldn't mix sound. It was all done acoustically, and it was very complicated technology. So they didn't. The first time anybody recorded an actual symphony orchestra was 1913. They did a Beethoven. I can't remember. It's the fifth or I believe it may have been the complete, because then you only had 3 minutes on a cylinder or 3 minutes on a disc. So think how many of those you need. And do you remember seeing those, Paul, where somebody would have like a 5-inch thick, and it was heavy, or not, maybe 4, and it would be one act of an opera or something, or a symphony movement, and it took 8 discs. Do you remember those things?
Yes. My uncle, referring again to my uncle, he had tons of them.
Yeah, I mean they were real luxuries. Of course, you didn't have 800 recordings. You had a small number, and you played them over and over and over and over, and then you shared them with your friends, and they shared theirs. And boy, these recordings were so precious and special.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, now people have shelves of them, and they never listen to them. And then they have iTunes, 18,000 songs on iTunes, and you're going to listen to 18,000 songs when?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, so what kind of, you make me think about what kind of things were first recorded. I mean, and when did it become I know that, I'm sure when the cylinder came out and they said, hey, we've got music, who could afford it?
Well, actually, and that's an important thing, and I mentioned this in the class session for this course in America's Artistic Legacy, which our Circle of Scholars members take. It wasn't, the first thing they thought about was not music, it was voices. And I remember learning that in that same bibliography class, by the way, as a grad student long ago in the 70s. I never thought about it. I remember my parents had some 78s with speeches on it, and I thought that was kind of weird because it's not, by the time I'm a kid in the 50s, you're not buying records for speeches, Maybe comedy routines. They were kind of popular for adults in the 50s when I was a kid. But the idea that was so wonderful, it goes back to Edison's Mary Had a Little Lamb, if you want. But the idea is now we can capture our presidents' voices, our industrial leaders, and our politicians, and our great poets' voices, and we could have our authors reading their own works. The idea was the voice. And then they became used very early on for commercials. And I don't really know how this all worked out, but there's a lot of early commercials recorded on these things, and they are like the funniest. I like to play them for the grad students because it would be the old, I mean, because this form comes out of vaudeville and it continues on for a long, we still get it sometimes in advertisements. So it would be the, oh, I can't begin to do it. I'm not crazy enough right now to do it. I should try, but so your tummy is upset. So what have you done for your tummy? Well, let's look at this Dr. Vakovich's tummy medication. Now, we don't mean just any tummy medication. You know, it goes on and on. Take Dr. Vakovich's, not Dr. and it would go on, and there'd be this carnival barker's voice, and you'd have 3 minutes of, and in the course of it, you'd hear Dr. Vakovich's tummy medication 70 times. In fact, we did that once with one, I can't remember what it was we were listening to, from a Berliner collection of that had been redone on DVDs, and I would put it on sometimes in class. We'd just sit back and listen and crack up. It was interesting, you know. And I think the name of the product, whatever it was, it was a baking powder. It was a baking powder. I bet anybody who took that class 40 years later will still remember it. And the name of the baking powder was probably said in 3 minutes, or not even 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 20 seconds. It was probably said about 40 times. I don't know, 35 times. And that was branding back then, you see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, music came after. Music had its own technological, and nobody, remember, people went to hear music live, and they made music, and they played music, and they sang music, and they played in community bands, and they sang at church, and they, you know, you didn't need to go to some piece of physical technology to hear music. That's not what music was.
Great point. Great point. And we've lost a lot of that. I mean, it's not common these days, and more, even schools are having to get rid of their music programs. Yeah, wow, great point. Well, and I have to admit, I'm one of those people. I'm one of those people who took the bare minimal in music. I play no instruments, and so the iPod, you know, becomes my instrument of choice. You know,
are we going to let you stay? I don't know what we're going to do about you. We may have to send you to music therapy.
I know. You know, like, at least give me a harmonica or something, and make me play something before I come to the next class. I don't know, but you know, that's the next section that we're getting into as far as this class is the arrangements, and you know, that's stuff that just blows me away. You know, just the idea of musical arrangements and how you keep track of it, and the combinations, and what kind of role did this play in the 19th and 20th centuries is the building these arrangements.
Well, we're very persnickety about it today. We think everything has to be exact, but we forget that up until really the early 1600s, people wouldn't even specify. Well, you never knew what the court or the castle down the road was going to have in the way of instruments. And one of the first pieces to specify which instrument plays what is Monteverdi's Orfeo, I believe 1607, I believe is right. I should rethink my dates, but I think that's right. Where in the score, because the assumption would be you would have, say, 5-part writing or 4 parts or 6 parts, and you would make your sopranos, like if you had flutes or if you had some kind of a reed instrument, and then you'd put your deeper strings in the middle or whatever you had. You know, you would your chest of viols, as they were called in Renaissance times, and you'd just make it all work. And Monteverdi actually writes out what the parts will be, you know, which instrument is playing which part. I mean, this was now, and that didn't even become standard behavior for a long time, and even in the Baroque, there was an assumption that you'd have an ensemble, and the conductor or the players would figure out, oh, okay, it's soprano line, alto line, we'll do this, I'll put the viola on this. I mean, there was indication, of course. It settles in, but it takes it a couple hundred years, you know, because there was that assumption of standard instruments being available for certain things. That just takes hundreds of years. Now we're, you know, a brass band has this in it, a jazz band has this in it, an orchestra has this in it, a wind band has this in it, but that takes a long time. And meanwhile, the whole theory of you play any old piece and make it work any way you can was how people heard music. So if you had a piano and you'd heard from your girlfriend who got to go to St. Louis, and she got to hear, she got to go to a vaudeville show, or she got to go to a some kind of Sunday afternoon community concert with some fancy ladies were there, and there was this really wonderful song and this really whatever, and she bought the sheet music before she came back from St. Louis. So if you have a pump organ, you're going to play it on the pump organ. If you have a guitar, you're going to try to play it on the guitar. If you have a piano, you're going to play it on the piano. You know, if there's 4 of your friends over, you all are going to turn it and harmonize it into a quartet spontaneously by just putting harmonies in. And then if somebody has a flute or somebody had a trumpet, people would just make music work out based on the means they had, and that was true at the concert level too. And in that assignment, as a kind of symbol of this, we have a Gottschalk piece that you can find this several different ways that I have assigned to listen to in 3 different, very different arrangements. And I think it really, it's a very musical experience to hear things done in different combinations of instruments and different combinations of instruments with voices. And it's how music spread. It's just, you just got to think about these little arrangements just running all around like you know, little mice running all over the country, you know? And people made it work and they enjoyed it. I mean, nothing was set in stone. The whole point was that you came to know the pieces and you were able to play them with whatever forces you had. And some combinations were bombastic and some combinations were more domestic, and you know, you didn't go and push your iPod.
Yeah.
Didn't, you know.
Right. You know, we seem to be less expecting for an artist to have a well-rounded bag of talent, so to speak. We talked about vaudeville a while back, and a few lessons ago, was it? And you know, somebody could come out and he was a good singer, he was a good player, he was a good actor, he was a good juggler. You know, it was like almost like he had to do all of these things. But now, it's just my observation. It doesn't seem that we don't tolerate that these days. It seems like when an actor, you know, we find out they can sing, we just, you know, every now and then they might have a hit or something like that. But there are very few people that are these. You know, we call them Renaissance people, you know, Renaissance man or something if he has more than one talent. But does that make sense? Is that,
yeah,
that way?
Your Gene Kellys and your Judy Garlands, and you know, that was really the last generation where everybody could do a lot. You know, they were expected to dance, to sing, to play an instrument. Because think how many of those movies from the 40s and the 30s, once you get into the talkies after the late 20s, the main character could sit down and play the piano or pick up a string bass or pick up a trumpet and play it and sing, and they were expected to dance. You know, you're right. I mean, now the expectation is it's extraordinary if we find out somebody can play 4 chords at the piano, and you know, talents. People who are talented musically are often talented artistically, and you know, dance and painting and drawing. They're not isolated little, you know, it's not like, oh, I've got a green thread through me, I can only paint, you know, or I can only throw pots and do ceramics, I couldn't possibly sing, you know. Yeah, I agree. We're very compartmentalized, and we don't expect our people, and we probably don't even want them, as you say. I bet you there's a lot of talent in entertainment today where people are really told not to let people find out that they're very good at, oh, I don't know, whatever it is. Right. I don't know how that works. Maybe someone knows how that works.
Well,
but you're right. It's not expected.
I know, you know, one of my favorites, Steve Martin, and he, you know, he became popular for stuff that, you know, kind of came later in his career, but at the beginning it was very vaudevillian. He's a great musician and songwriter, and you know, he cuts CDs, but the only people that buy them nowadays are people like me, you know. Just because I'll buy just about anything, you know, because I see him as a genius. But that's another subject. But
that's good. And we're going to be talking vaudeville in the next couple lessons. I'm trying to think where we are with it, but it's already coming up. And you don't really lose vaudeville because vaudeville still influences our late Saturday night programs. It influences our pageants. It influences our humor, so we don't lose that. The difference is we don't expect as much, as you say.
Yeah, it's still in our entertainment, even if we don't realize it. I took a soft course, and I really don't know much about Dvorak. So can you tell me what you would like us to take away for this class about him?
Well, I talk about him in this unit because of the big thing that when he came to the United States for just a few years, was brought here at a fantastic salary to give validity to a wonderful woman, Thurber, who was trying to create a first-class, world-class conservatory in New York, and did what we all do. You know, you try to hire someone well-known, famous to come and it's like going out recruiting for sports teams. You want the best. And Dvorak was a very, very popular Czech composer. I know you're fond of Czech culture, Paul. I know some people you ran around with a camera with in Prague. Let's see, who could that be?
Yeah, I'm still a little worn out from that. It's 2 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Paul could tell you all stories. He's behaving always with this, but when we take Paul out on filming trips with us, it's well, we try to tell him he better rest up because nobody sleeps on these, and now he believes us now.
I do. I don't know how you do it, but it's great.
It is exciting, but Dvorak was a superstar by the time he came here, and why he's really important. And I'm actually going to read, since you brought it up. I just in case we got to that topic. Let's see. Actually, I brought this wonderful anthology I've made reference to in the course. I'll show the picture of it. I think it'll come up if we have pictures.
Yes.
Called Music in the USA. Look how big this is. Isn't this wonderful? Music in the USA, and it's an anthology by Judith Tick, who basically she's taken one of my favorite kinds of books. It's a source readings book. That means there's documents, whether they're newspaper articles, magazine articles, concert reviews, personal letters. I'm trying to, advertisements, everything you can think of, diary entries, and so they're the actual stuff of events, and it's arranged chronologically for the history of American music, and I love these kind of books in whether it's art history or politics or religious history. And Dvorak was exposed to spirituals through a man named Henry Burley, who later was going to become a very important arranger of the spiritual as an art song. He was a singer. He was a free black in New York, and he was extremely important for Dvorak because Dvorak had never heard these melodies, these spirituals from the Southern slave spirituals, which we talk about in the unit or have talked about. I think it was the previous unit. I can't remember where all the units go. I'm sorry, guys, but it's in there. I promise. And he was so amazed by this music. So he basically said what others have said. You Americans, you keep imitating Beethoven and Brahms and Mendelssohn, and look what you've got for your own folk music. Remember, late 19th century. Everybody in Europe, and increasingly in America, but particularly in Europe, they are so tuned in to their folk music. They see modern technology taking away the rural life. They see trains. They see the telegraph, the telephone, the photography. They see all these intrusions on the village life, and they know it's just a matter of time before the younger generations all go to the city, which happened, and the old way of life is dissolved. And so they try to capture the folk poetry and the folk songs. That's Bartok, it's Kodai, it's Percy Granger, it's a whole lot of people doing it from different places. Dvorak's looking around saying, you guys have this culture of spirituals, among other things, and you're not using it in your composition. And he called them Negro melodies. And so what he wrote, and this is such a... if I can find this quote, and I had it marked. I see whenever you have something marked, that's always the first mistake, isn't it? Oh, I know which one it is. Let's see.
That looks like the kind of book that somebody who likes going to the Library of Congress might read.
There is that. Okay. Well, there is that too, but I'm telling you. Oh, I found it. I'm telling you, these source readings are really good because I'll tell you the trick, and I used to say this to students too. If you can follow a source readings book, let's say it's on the American Revolutionary War, okay? If you can follow the excerpts and kind of know where it all sort of kind of fits, then you know your topic, okay? I mean, that's it, because you're getting like vignettes. You're almost getting like a little telescope, where if you plop down on this thing. Okay, I found this. This is called Dr. Dvorak. It sounds funny, doesn't it, Dr. Dvorak? Finds in them the basis, the real value of Negro melodies, finds in them the basis for an American school of music, rich in undeveloped themes. And then it goes on and says, American composers are urged to study plantation songs and build upon them. And in the text it says, and this is what Dvorak said in an interview, basically, and I'm trying to think to whom he was speaking. I'd have to look, but somebody, I won't look now. He said, I am now satisfied that the future music of this country of America must be founded upon what are called Negro melodies. This must be the real foundation of any serious and original school of composition to be developed in the United States. When I first came here last year, I was impressed with this idea, and it has developed into a settled conviction. These beautiful and varied themes are the product of the soil. They are American. I would like to trace out the traditional authorship of the Negro melody, for it would throw a great deal of light upon the question I am most deeply interested in at the present. And the fruit of all that is his New World Symphony, and for most people, that largo melody that's in that slow movement that goes to which we think of as a classical symphonic melody, but as of course it is a Negro melody. It is an American spiritual. So that one, we still are in America, but we really were sort of going, tell us what we're doing is important, and Dvorak told us, and it meant a lot to a lot of people for decades thereafter.
That's great. So it took someone from outside to kind of give us a clue. Hey, what you got here is great. You got to check this out.
And does that not always happen? Think about how often that happens in our life, even with our children. We can say to them, oh, you look so cute, and that hair looks, and it has to be someone else saying it. We have to hear it from someone else always, or we don't think it's valid. And in terms of art and culture, it's European endorsement of what we're doing in America that really will add solidity and conviction, as he called it, a solid conviction, and kind of give us the confidence we need to take off in our own American directions.
Wow. Well, I think we're going to be wrapping this up.
Yeah, we better. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah,
we got a lot of topics in, though, didn't we? I think we covered plenty.
I think so. It's a great course and good material. I have note that next class we're going to be talking more about the Gilded Age, and it mirrored so much about the luxury at the end of the 19th century in Europe. And so, are you going to give us a little teaser on that, or are we going to find out why in the next lesson?
If you've got a Tiffany lamp or an imitation knockoff Tiffany lamp, which is what a lot of us have, or if you have brocade in your house, or any of those drapes that have the little, what do you call it, the fringes, coming down, or if you have, overstuffed chairs from your great aunt's house that's up in your attic, you've got some reflections of the Gilded Age in style. But yeah, that's an interesting time period we're going to be getting into, where enormous wealth is being accumulated in this country, and for the first time we're going to be palace builders. The way the czars were, the way the monarchs were, we haven't been palace builders in this country, and there's going to be a stratum of Americans who are going to have the money to build. They're going to be called mansions, or they've got all kinds of names, but they are small palatial structures that indicate a whole new direction for American popular culture in that line of people who can afford to do it, and all the industry that will build up again, trying to supply these luxury goods, the luxury good market. This is when it develops. It's coming.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor Carol. To those of you, thank you for joining us here on America's Artistic Legacy, this being the section New Technologies and Gilded Age.